So continuing with factors that contribute to obesity, they've done a lot of those big observational studies, those epidemiological studies, and the one thing that's really consistent as being associated with increased obesity is consumption of sugary beverages. So the concentration, the reason that, I believe sugary beverages are addictive is that the concentration of sugar is higher than found in nature. So it provides some people with a big dopamine hit. Additionally, liquid calories don't provide the satiety signal that solid foods do. So that makes sugary beverages particularly problematic. So another factor that contributes to obesity is genetics. Now, in the 80s, before obesity started increasing so much, the prevalence started increasing so much, we thought that about 80% of the variation in people's body fatness was due to genetics. You can actually breed a mice or a rat to be lean or obese. Unfortunately for the rats, the genetically obese rat is called the Zucker fatty. And I think that's a terrible thing to call a rat just because he has a genetic weight problem. The lean rats are typically Sprague Dawley rats. So anyway, in the 90s, I remember when this happened, because I'm old, they discovered this leptin gene. Leptin is a hormone. So they discovered this new hormone that seems to regulate body fatness in these rodents that had genetic obesity. We thought that this was going to be the answer to the obesity issue that was increasing by this time in the 90s. So the leptin gene is responsible for making a hormone called leptin, and this hormone decreases the appetite. When it gives its signal to the appetite regulation centers in the brain, it causes a decrease in the appetite, an increase in metabolic rate, and an increase in the desire for spontaneous physical activity. So that's a win-win-win. The appetite, metabolic rate, and the desire for activity. So everyone was like, cool. Because what happens is when your body fat starts to increase, your fat cells increase the release of leptin. So as you gain body fat, more leptin is released, and that should give a signal to the appetite regulation centers to decrease the appetite. Well, these rats that are genetically obese don't have the gene to make leptin, so they didn't make enough. And that's why they didn't get that fed signal, and they constantly had a high appetite, overate, and became obese. So what they did was they injected these rats with leptin, and their appetites decreased, and they lost weight. So we thought this is the answer. It's a protein hormone, so you'd have to inject it like insulin. But we thought this could be the answer. This is why some people are obese. Well, it turns out that it's not. It didn't happen that way. Sorry, I advanced too quick. Let's see. So humans have leptin, but people who are obese seem to have higher levels of leptin. What the deal is, because if they have high levels of leptin, they should have a low appetite, but their leptin doesn't work well. It's just like type 2 diabetes, where you have insulin and it doesn't work well. So in obese people, they have plenty of leptin most of the time, but it doesn't give the signal to the brain to reduce the appetite. So that's a real bummer. Now, there's a very, very small subset of obese humans who do have this genetic defect where they don't make enough leptin, and leptin injections would help with their weight. But for the vast majority of obese people, they make plenty of leptin. Their brain just doesn't recognize the signal. Some other key hormones, we talked about ghrelin, that's released in increasing amounts between meals, and it serves as a signal to the appetite regulation centers to increase the appetite, that it's time to eat. They have found that there may be a problem with ghrelin signaling, either decreased amounts or lack of recognition of the signal in the brain by people who are obese. Additionally, when obese people lose weight, ghrelin levels increase. Baseline ghrelin levels are higher, so the person has just a higher level of hunger overall, and then it peaks higher between meals. So again, that's one of the body's protective mechanisms against starvation. When you start losing weight, more ghrelin is produced and you get hungrier to try and gain that weight back and prevent starvation. But it doesn't really help someone who's trying to lose weight and keep it up. But ghrelin is sometimes called the hunger hormone. PYY336 is another gut hormone. It's released in increasing amount. Well, it's released when there's food present in the GI tract, and it signals the brain to reduce the appetite. It signals the brain that you're full and don't need to eat anymore. Here's another, and so people may have differences in their ability to produce the ghrelin and PYY336 as appropriate to control their appetite. Here's some additional evidence for the genetic component of obesity, and that's twin studies. And there can be differences between identical twins, but there is a tendency for identical twins' bodies not only to be similar in body composition overall, but where they store their body fat, more so than fraternal twins that don't share the same genes. So here's a picture of identical twins, and you can see their body fatness or the body composition and body fat distribution is really similar. And there we have some fraternal twins who have different body types. Now, this is an important equation to remember. Genes work within an environment to produce your body composition, okay? So the official equation is genotype plus environment equals phenotype, and phenotype means the outcome. So you can change your environment. You're not doomed by your genes. You can manipulate the phenotype or outcome or appearance to some degree by changing your environment. And here I'm talking about the diet and exercise environment, your food environment, and your activity environment to alter appearance or body composition to a certain extent. Now, another factor that contributes to obesity is psychological factors. Think about if you're a stress eater. Okay, some of us are gaining a little bit of fluff during the COVID shelter in place and the stress associated with our, lives being changed so much with the current situation that's gone on. There's a lot of memes about that now. Some people their appetite increases when they're stressed out, and then there's some people who lose their appetite when they're stressed out. And some people, their appetite is increased when they're under some stress, but when they're under extreme stress, they lose their appetites. And it has to do with, brain chemistry and all that, that I'm not going to go into in this course. But there are some people who go beyond just stress eating. They're emotional eaters. They use food as a coping mechanism. Just like some people use alcohol or drugs or gambling or other things. People who use food as a coping mechanism and binge regularly to get that relief from an emotional situation, they oftentimes have a bona fide eating disorder called binge eating disorder. So we'll talk a little bit more about the environment. Like I mentioned before, in addiction, cues to eat, or when I was talking about dopamine, cues to eat stimulate the appetite. Okay, you may not be thinking about food, but this happened to me at work yesterday. One of the hospital administrators came by with Easter candy, and I wasn't hungry, wasn't really thinking about eating, but when I saw that bowl of candy that he was passing around, I sure did, take a piece and eat it. So they've done experiments again with rats, and the genetically lean rats, when they're offered a lot of highly palatable foods with a lot of variety, they overate and gained weight. When they're on their standard rat chow diet, they control their appetite really well. But when they're offered a lot of tasty foods that give them, that reward, they do tend to overeat and gain weight. Also, eating habits can be learned. If you grow up in a family environment where people eat healthy, you're more likely to eat healthy and learn to like healthy foods. If you're in an environment where a lot of people where people do not eat healthy, they eat a lot of junk food, you'll probably develop that type of habit. The people that you surround yourself with do influence your eating behaviors. This variety thing is really interesting. Normally we tell people to eat a variety of foods to make sure they get the gamut of nutrients they need, the variety of nutrients they need. But if you're at a buffet, think about a buffet where there's a lot of tasty foods available. When I go to a buffet, well, I don't go anymore because I know I will overeat. That is 100% given. And it's because everything that's available. The second thing is I'm cheap, so I want to get my money's worth. But you develop what's called taste fatigue. The first bite of a food is really interesting and tastes really good, and then as you eat it, it becomes less novel. So you go to the next food and get that novel, interesting, it tastes really good, especially the first bite. And food does taste better when you're hungry too. But one of the things that some people can do to help reduce the amount they eat is to, for a while, limit the variety of food. We'll talk more about this later. So, hate to do this to you, but pizza is a real popular food. You might not have been, well, you probably weren't thinking about pizza, but you might be now. Okay, I'm going to stop this clip right now and I'll continue with the next one.